very soon to be Rock families are here too. But I just kind of wanted to talk through like why we felt it was important and necessary to do a parent workshop on teen mental health. And I think the way that is best explained is just through a story from when I first became a Rock leader as a volunteer back in, we're talking like 2021, right out of COVID. But I came to high school summer camp as a cabin leader, and I was leading a group of 11 high school girls. And at the end of the 5-day camp, 6 of the 11 girls shared either a past suicide attempt or a current struggle with self-harm. And so for me to share that is just to help us understand that we can hear all these statistics sometimes and make them feel like they're very impersonal to us. Like there's no way my kid's struggling with this, there's no way that my kids' friends are dealing with this. But when we hear all of those stats, like they're just as close to home for us as they are for anybody. And I would almost even say that in Loudoun County, where the pressure is way high for success and career and all that stuff, I would argue that some of our students probably wrestle with anxiety even a little bit more than other parts of the country. So all that to say, we felt like it was really important because mental health is a hot topic right now. It's a hot topic right now. Everyone's talking about it, and we want to make sure that we as the church are talking about it too, because we want all of our answers and all of our questions to be coming from a place of biblical identity and the truth that can only be found in God's word and the grace of the gospel and the hope that we have that's only through the gospel. So I just wanted to say again, thank you guys so much for coming. I can't say enough good things about Eliza, and I'm going to hand it off to Britton to pray, formally introduce Eliza, and then I'm actually going to head out to do the scavenger. No, I'm refereeing it. I don't know. So I won't get that fun. I know some of the parents are a little jealous that they don't get to participate. So I'm going to hand it off to Britton.
Before I step in, location pastor, can I just, as parents, we're so grateful for you. You're doing awesome. So Eliza is pretty much awesome. Published author, resident, amazing gift of God to McLean Bible Church. I know most of y'all are aware of Eliza and her ministry at McLean. I want you to know that we're sitting front row. We're going to sit front row. That's where the Taylors are. They're coming in as learners, so I can't wait to sit under the teaching of Eliza today. Eliza's not only a trusted counselor, she's a trusted friend. And I know for some of us, we have been on the receiving end of her speaking truth and love to us in the complexity and the hurt in our own lives. And so I commend Eliza in her teaching tonight. Thank you so much for being here. Let me pray for us, and then we'll get going. Lord, what an absolute gift of your grace that we're here gathered together to be able to just to consider such a delicate but important topic. And I pray that you would give Eliza your words to give counsel to our lives and to our families and to our loved ones. Lord, that we would be a church where our questions, we seek answers in the truth of your word, that we would seek answer in the wisdom that you give us from above. And Lord, that you would give us the grace and the mercy that we need in each and every one of our lives and every one of our circumstances. So Lord, bless our time, strengthen us, empower us, equip us, encourage us as Eliza teaches us. And it's in your name we pray. Amen.
Well, thank you so much for having us. I had a meeting at Tyson's this past Sunday called Bridging the Gap, where we were trying to get to know who in our church are mental health workers or interested in that field, and just kind of bringing them together. And one gal asked a question. She's like, is McLean doing anything for Mental Health Awareness Month? Because May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And if you're in the mental health field, you know that. Or if you are in the government, they plaster it all over your screens. I think at least my husband's screen is definitely plastered with it. But resources that people truly need in the moment of crisis. We have the hope that they need. We have the wisdom because we have God's word, which does speak to all of the struggles that we have. But I like to bring those two things together. I'm going to try to stay with my notes for the sake of time so that we don't get too far off topic. Because I actually have probably more content than we can get through tonight. But I'm just going to go to a point it looks like we're going to wrap up for questions. So there will be time for questions at the end. And really, I would say I'm open to whatever questions you want to ask. The one thing I would encourage you is if you are asking specifically questions about your children, to honor them in the way that you ask the question. And so it may be more general the way you ask it. So where we're going to start with you guys tonight is, and I hope you actually like this. This could be just me sharing what I really like and what really gets me excited, but we're going to start with some foundation stuff because I'm guessing most of you in here have teens. But who in here has not just teens but younger? So teens and younger. Okay, so yeah, that's what I was thinking. There's a lot of stuff in here that if you only have teens, you might feel like, I wish I would have known that. However, what I found as a parent, so by the way, I have 3 children. They're all raised and grown, so there is actually hope to get through the teen years. It's possible to do it and survive. But there were times when I was learning some of this stuff, and I thought to myself, this helps me understand you so much more, even though some of it was kind of like younger than them. They were already past that, but it was like things were clicking. So this is kind of, you're going to have a little mix of psychoeducation from like the clinical counseling side, and then biblical care just from this is why I do what I do. I am committed to making sure we understand that really the hope for change really does come from the work that God does through the Spirit and guides us through His Word. So it's going to be a little bit foundational, and I'm kind of probably going to go through it faster than I could. I could spend a lot of time on it. So we're going to start I want to actually start with brain development. And the reason why is if we can understand what's happening, you might actually understand your teen a little bit more and can actually really help you know how to navigate these years. What I will say is that we tend to spend in the church, we spend a lot of time talking about the soul, our souls, how to grow and nurture our children's souls, but even in our own lives, which is great, and we should spend a lot of time doing that. But we are also bodies, and when we have that understanding of the body, we have to keep in mind that our brain is a significant part of our body and comes into play when it comes to our spiritual, like how we think about things spiritually, or our mental health is a big aspect of that. So I want to take some time and just kind of help you understand a little bit more about brain development. And I'm going to start with just the basics of understanding how the brain is developed in children. So all of you are wise children, so this is also true of you. So I'm not sure if these colors are easy to see or not. I realize, well, I'll talk through them so you know. But basically, there's lots of ways that we can talk about the brain. And whenever you talk about mental health, you really do need to understand the brain. Because a lot of the times it's what's happening, sometimes physically in the brain, that comes out in the actions and behaviors and so forth. So when we think about brain development, you can think of the brain and, oh my goodness, there's so many ways you could discuss it, like regions of the brain, or lobes, or hemispheres, or there's just a lot of ways we can talk about it. I'm just going to talk about these 3 areas of the brain that really come into play with child development. And the first part is the brainstem. So the brainstem is represented by that inner kind of orange color here. This is what develops first. So this section right here, that is connected to the spine, and that is fully developed at birth, unless a child is premature. And keep in mind, as I'm talking about this, I am talking about a neurotypical child. There's going to be neurodiversities, there's going to be learning disabilities and things like that. So this is kind of, we would say, neurotypical. There's a spectrum, but mostly we're talking about what's typical. So it is very much the norm for a child at birth to have a fully developed brainstem. And a brainstem, so I actually just want to pause for a second. When you have a baby, and you're holding that little baby, they have a fully developed brain stem. It's so important to remember that that brain is not developed yet. And it's so easy to forget because you look at everything else and it seems to be like everything's all there. but the brain is not fully developed. So we want to make sure we understand that. The brainstem is responsible for things like anything that's automatic in our bodies. So blinking, breathing, swallowing, digestion, all the organ function. It regulates blood pressure, it regulates heart rate, all of those things. And whenever this part of the brain is most active, whenever this part of the brain is most active, you're considered in survival state. So that kind of makes sense, right? So when might you think is that part of your brain most active, do you think? Yeah, when you're sleeping. That is taking over, keeping you alive, praise God. But it's also active all the time because it's keeping you alive. So that's the first part to develop. And it's important for us to know this and we'll look at why in just a second. The second part of the brain the next part of the brain that it develops is the limbic system. The limbic system is very important. It's developed usually around the first year to age 5. And it gets fully developed by about age 5. So just remember there are 2 stages of your kid's life where brain development happens very fast. This part when the limbic system is being developed, and then the next one, which I'm going to talk about in a second. So around 1 to 5, this is rapidly developing, and it is responsible for things like emotion. Anybody ever hear of the amygdala? It's in this part of your brain. So the amygdala is what controls fight, flight, or freeze. It gives us our emotional responses. So that's a really important part of our brain, but it's taking care of like the emotions side of things. It's responsible for motivation. So if you were to have a little baby whose limbic brain is not yet developed, and you were to hold that little baby and say, if you just smile, I'll give you a bottle. No, they're going to cry, right? They're not going to smile for you. There's no motivation that has been developed in them. They don't know that. They're strictly in the survival state. But if you were to say to a toddler, if you come to me, I'll give you a piece of candy, they'll come because the motivation side of their brain is being developed. And so that's another thing in there. Aspects of behavior also are in this part of the brain. Long-term memory. So you can begin to expect certain things of children that you couldn't before because they can remember now. But the fight, flight, or freeze response is also highly active in this part of the brain. This part of the brain is responsible for regulating things like sleep or appetite. It is associated with reward and pleasure as an adult. So as I'm talking about these things, they're true of you as an adult. That is the part of the brain that those things are happening in. Behavioral, this is really important. Behavioral and emotional and relational skills are developed in that age range. And that is laying the foundation for how they are going to interact in the adolescent years. So you're teaching them in these early years that they're learning that, and it will show back up as the next part of the brain gets more fully developed. So you're laying the foundation, and the best way you do that is through modeling. That is the best way to teach them, is through modeling emotional well-being, emotional health, emotional regulation. And this happens in consistent, safe, supportive relationships, which is why God designed children to be in families, because that's where they learn these things. So relational development is starting in this age. The next part of the brain, though, that biggest shaded area develops last, that's the cortical brain. And it develops more significantly starting at about age 12. So now they're entering, if you've got 12-year-olds, they're entering into a new growth development of their brain. And it's really hard to keep that in mind because if you've got a 10-year-old, their cortical brain is not even nearly developed yet. And so I say that to, in some ways, like give your kids a little bit of a break. They do not have a fully developed brain yet. It's just, and you're probably like, yeah, I know. But, so it starts at age 12. Anybody have any idea when it's considered fully developed? What age?
26.
Okay, if involved in higher order functions. So things like cognition, thinking through something, actually kind of understanding, if I do this, then that. So you can see this is like, it's not fully developed in your teenager. But neither is inhibition. So that part of it, that like this is where this part of the brain starts to kick in as well, is when you're about 25, 26, 27, you have a little bit more understanding of the need for inhibition. But you have these kids who have like, they're motivated, has a lot of motivation in here as well. They have, they're able to regulate intelligent thought, they're able to develop emotional connection a little bit more, executive functioning and attention is developed in this stage a lot more, the ability to process information and to want the end game. That's executive functioning. If I do this, then I can get this, kind of that motivation and cause and effect. But they don't have inhibition, which is why they will do things out there that we pray that everybody would be saying tonight. Because it's like, no, don't do that. That is not good. So it's really important to kind of understand that's what's happening here. And when is this fully developed? What did we say? 26, 27? Anybody have children before the age of 26, 27? Okay, so you were raising children with not a fully developed brain. So keep that in mind, right? I was one of them. My first baby was born at 23, so yes, exactly. It's just important to keep that in mind, and I say that really quickly. I could go on and on about why this matters, but I'm going to just touch on it slightly, just a little bit tonight. And that really does come into play with understanding their capacity. So the reason why I tell you about the brain development is, and I hope that you're kind of thinking through, like, where does my child fall as far as their age? Where is their brain developing and still needing a lot more development? We want to understand their capacity. No matter what age or stage your child is, you want to do this because otherwise you will either expect too much or too little of your child. And expecting too much of your child means that you're putting too much pressure on them. Expecting too little means you're putting too much pressure on you. And so we want to be able to understand what is best for where our kids are. And so when it comes to raising emotionally healthy kids, you need to know what's generally expected in various ages and stages. And I wish I would have known some of this, honestly, when I was raising my kids. I was given a lot of information about child-proofing my home. You guys probably did that. I got a lot of information about what to feed them or what not to feed them, how to bathe them, but I got zero information about where their brain was and what I could expect from them because of that, specifically when it comes to their emotional health. And that's what we're going to talk about in these next, but I wanted to lay that first so that you kind of understand why I'm kind of harping on these ages and stages, because it all goes back to where is their brain at that stage. So let's take a look a little bit at, and I will go through these probably a lot faster than you're going to want me to, but I want to get to the teen stuff. So we're going to start with birth to 3 years. Anybody have kids in this age? Anybody had kids in this age? Okay, good. So this applies to everybody. Great. So this is, at this age, you're seeing expressing emotion really is manifest in very general ways, not specific at all. So take crying, for example. Crying can mean a lot of things emotionally. What can it mean in a baby emotionally? Hungry. Tired. Cold. It could, yes, there's so many things. I'm uncomfortable. It could mean I'm surprised. It could mean lots of different things. Confusion, exhaustion. Somebody said they're tired. It could even mean anger. Things like that. So there's a lot of emotions that could come out in one type of expression. So with younger children, it is definitely general, not specific. And laughter can certainly be another area. Laughter can be excitement and joy, or it can be startling, right? Or it can be that they're entertained and comforted. So all of those things to say, it's very general in this age. Children mirror the emotions of their caregivers. So it's really important. Your emotional response as a parent has a significant teaching impact on your little one. So as you raised your children, you were training them in their emotional responses. So babies and toddlers, Emotions are highly influenced. I'm so sorry. They're highly influenced by those who are they're with, and they're not necessarily, they don't have the verbal communication, but they will use their bodies to tell you how they feel. So what are some of the ways that, not with their voices, what are some ways with their bodies that a child in this age might show you how they feel? What might they do?
Stop.
They what?
Stop.
Stop. Yeah, like get angry or express themselves physically, like exerting that emotion through a bodily response. Yes. Anything else come to mind?
Cower.
Cower, like, oh no, I'm afraid, like a run, hide. Yes. Maybe I'm ashamed. They'll show it in their body. Or maybe they stiffen up. Have you ever seen a little baby just stiffen up? They're exerting their will. They have an opinion that they don't have the verbiage for. So those are the types of things you're going to see. But I'm going to quickly tell you then what can parents do. So parents should provide comfort and attention to the child's needs and emotional expressions. Okay, I always look terrible when they take pictures, so I don't know why that is. I was like the biggest distraction. Yes, it's true. No, so take your picture, but I will smile because I always look angry. Yeah, I think you all should turn and look at me. Everybody can wave. We can make it easy. Thank you. All right. Okay, sorry. I won't stop anymore. But seriously, I do not know what it is. I always look so mad whenever people take pictures of me when I talk. So I don't know what that is. All right. So we want to provide comfort and attention to the child's emotional expressions. We want to actually begin to identify your child's emotions, and you do that simply by saying things like, "Oh, you look so happy," or "Are you angry?" or you're giving them emotional words. Anybody? Well, no, we already asked this question. All right. So these are the types of ways that you're going to help them learn how to express their emotions, but you're also telling them that our relationship, this home, our interaction is a safe place for you to have emotions. So name them, label them, speak about them. It will be so much helpful later. And then you're going to want to correct or ignore them cautiously. There's definitely a time when you're going to want to ignore some emotions. And if you have a more emotional child, there's probably going to be a little bit more times where it's not going to be necessary to go after every emotional outburst that you see. But do it cautiously, because again, what I want to encourage parents is don't communicate that emotions are not okay to have. Because we have them, and they're God-given, and they move us to do things. They have actually the word motion in them, right? Emotion. They move us to do things, so they're a good thing. So at this early age, your response to their distress affirms that you can be trusted and that you will attend to their needs. All right, how about this? Be cautious, I already said that. How about this age? Anybody have kids in this age? Or any kind of, okay, good. So we got some people here in that early childhood age. Children have more ability to express and identify their emotions. Play and imagination is key. So this is the age, if there's going to be counseling, it's more than likely going to be play therapy. And you can see it in your kids. They will live out what they're dealing with in their play. If you pay attention, you'll see it. They become very aware of how their emotions affect other people. Before that, they're not really aware of how it affects other people, and it seems like they don't even care. But it's just they're not aware of it. The brain isn't developed enough to understand those things. Children begin to empathize at this stage, and a big change in their development is how they respond to the emotional highs and lows of others. They begin to be more emotionally impacted by their playmates as well. So they also take things personally at this age, where they didn't before. They really kind of start to see the shame kind of their actions, and they feel a lot more hurt. Shame is an interesting thing. It actually doesn't develop in humans until about 18 months. And you see that. Little baby, I have a grandbaby, he's the cutest thing in the world. He will just, like, I gave him a bath the other day, he just peed all over the place. No shame. He didn't have any care in the world, right? None at all. And you see that, like, there's something about shame. We just had Kurt Thompson at Tyson's, and he was talking about that. 18 months old, they start to realize that. So there's changes that are starting to happen. So what can parents do at this age? Provide encouraging and positive support to the child's feelings. So even if emotions are negative, hear me out, or expressed wrongly, a parent can be supportive and helpful towards the child, towards more appropriate expressions. But we're parents and we get tired, and it's so much easier just to say, stop it, or no, when really what you want to do is attend to them and then help them have a different reaction. And in that, you're teaching them about emotion regulation. So help them to see that they can have feelings that are strong and choose the actions. So this will bring clarification that emotions are not necessarily sinful, but how you express them can be. So we want to be able to help them think through that. We also want to begin to ask simple questions about your child's feelings. So you then, instead of saying, oh, you look so happy, or are you angry, we want to ask questions like, what made you upset? Or can you tell me how you feel? Emotion wheels are great. There's one in the back of that book that, this book I wrote. We put one in the back of the book because so many times, like we as parents don't really have words for our emotions. So having emotions wheels are really helpful resources for kids and adults, really. What thoughts are in your mind when you feel this way? Just you want to be really good at asking them questions. And I actually have a list of questions for each stage if you feel like I really don't know what to ask my kids. So I'll give you those handouts at the end. You also want to allow for personal expression of emotions at this age. So some kids become physically needy when they're emotionally distressed, like they really need you near them. Other kids just need to talk, and some kids need space to where they can calm down and kind of maybe they need to run. You have to be a student of your own child. But parents can also help regulate, or parents can help to help your child begin to strategize about how to manage or respond to emotions. So this helps them begin to move towards emotion regulation. Have you guys heard that term before, emotion regulation? You're just trying to help them understand, how do I take this emotion that feels so strong and move into a little bit of a space of clear thinking, calmer reaction. And and I heard Sissy Goff say this, we had her talk, I don't even know, maybe a year or two ago now, but she said the best thing that you can give an emotionally dysregulated child is a regulated parent. And I would say that is at any stage. Whether you're talking to a toddler or you're talking to a teen, the best thing that you can give an emotionally dysregulated child, a child who is acting very emotional in their response, is a regulated parent. So if you are not regulated, deal with you first. That's the most important thing that you can do. And I feel like that is at every stage for sure. Co-regulation is also a very helpful thing. If you are in a heated kind of, whether they're 4 or 14, you can get into a space where you're both feeling those really strong emotions. Every parent has been there multiple times a day, definitely probably even today. If you are there, if you know how to calm yourself down, you can do it right there with them. And it can be so helpful for them. And that's how you give them that emotionally regulated parent. And then, you're going to teach them as well that God can help them. God can help them. This is a great age to start bringing in the Lord. God can help them with their strong feelings, and pray with them to help them. Ask and let them know, like, this is where I go when my emotions are strong, and I hope you do. I hope that when you are in an emotionally intense place, that you go to the Lord. So go there with your child. You got a drink. So am I loud enough? Because I'm really trying. Yep. You guys in the back can hear me okay? Okay, good. Of course. There's always that one. Okay. Let's look at the next stage. All right, 8 to 11. How many have 8 to 11-year-olds in here? Great. Super. You have an 8 to 11-year-old? Yes, you do. That's right. 1 or 2? Just one. Okay. All right. So let's talk about this. Expect rocks the world, really, and our world as parents. So emotional reactions may seem too big for the situation. Anybody feel that way? Yeah. Or sometimes, and some of you might have some kids like this, sometimes they seem too small. You might not just have an emotionally intense kid. You might actually have a kid where you're like, what do you really feel? And that can concern parents as well. So that is actually normal. Because they don't know what to do with things. So they're either like, here I am, or they're kind of like, I'm just going to go way inside. That is part of this age that you can see in children. And the reason I say that is because you don't need to necessarily always be worried when you see certain things in your kids. There's certain things that show up at different ages and stages of kids that look like emotional, or that look like mental health problems, but show up in certain stages. Oddly enough, there's OCD tendencies that show up in the ages of 9 to 11, especially in girls. Why? I have no idea why. But doctors get a little less concerned when you have a 9 to 11-year-old girl who is like kind of doing things that are OCD, having certain compulsions to do certain things. But if they start to get into the teenage years and those things continue, they get a little bit more like, okay, maybe we need to be a little more concerned about this. So just know that their brain is going through a lot of changes. Children at this stage will look to their peers for emotional support for really the first time. They'll begin to share their emotions with their peers. Despite parental connection, influence, despite this though, parental connection, influence, and affirmation is absolutely needed. And they will tell you that. Well, they will tell you. But in studies and surveys of children, not just in this age, but in the next age where you're in the teen years, they will say that they still want their parents' affirmation, their parents' support, and even their parents' direction on certain topics like sex and drugs and things that are like you feel like they're only looking to social media or their peers. They actually want your input. They're just not going to tell you. So just know that. They're not going to ask for it, they're not going to tell you, and they're going to act like you're really dumb when you do tell them. But they need that. Affirm them. Affirm them. There are going to be so many things that start to happen, not just in this age, but in the age that the next one we're going to look at, that's going to make you feel like you've got to correct. Make sure you're encouraging them as well. Independent thinking and agency are explored and expressed. And children can vocalize and share their emotions a whole lot more in this age. And so you're going to see them doing that. So what can parents do? Parents can continue to help with emotion regulation. It's just something that you're going to have to just commit to being a part of. Avoid matching their emotions. Again, at this age, it is not helpful. Instead, seek to temper their situations and model self-control. You're going to need it for the next stage. So practice it in this age. Model self-control. Allow your child to share their emotions and provide comfort and direction in conversations. Listen to them when they open up. And I know you think you're listening to them, but you have to listen longer. And when you think you finally are like, okay, listen a little bit longer. Because we are really good at lecturing. We're not very good at listening. All right, so avoid jumping quickly into instruction or correction, as I mentioned. Even if you think that you really, really have to correct them, give a little bit more time to make sure you understand and hear them. Let's see. Oh yeah. Be involved in their interaction with peers, especially social media. There is a reason why there's an age cap on most social media platforms. And it's usually not this age. It's higher and it's getting higher. I just saw recently in the news that Utah passed a know their interactions, be involved in that, monitor, be very, very cautious around any kind of online interaction. Offer alternatives, offer alternatives to their actions because they don't have that fully developed cortical brain. So offer them possible options for like redos of situations. Because you might ask them, well, what would you do differently if you had to do it again? They don't know. So offer that. Give them suggestions. What if you tried this? What would that do if you tried that? So give them those potential options and don't expect them to actually come up with them on their own. They're going to need help discovering what choices they can make, especially during emotionally distressing situations. And lastly, I would say encourage in this age. Encourage your child to take their emotions to the Lord. Encourage them to talk to the Lord. Journal. But if you don't have a kid who likes to journal, then just do you guys know what a bullet journal is? Just give them a topic like why I felt angry at my brother. And just all you gotta do is bullet journal a few things. Or even at this age you can still have it, draw it out. But what you're doing is you're helping them express what is going on inside of here, what's going on inside of here, out of them. That's what processing is. There's a quote that I love by D.T. Niles, the founder of the Navigators, and he said, thoughts disentangle themselves when they pass through the lips or pencil tips. And so we untangle when we let them talk it out, or maybe even draw it out, or write it out, or whatever that is. So know that they need to untangle those thoughts. They need help to do it. They're going to need you to kind of help guide them. All right, so here we are at the teen years. I'm guessing, does everybody have teens in this? Most everybody? Okay, good. All right, children become more self-conscious and they struggle with emotionally fitting in, right? Yes. They feel awkward and are overly concerned with their image, with what they look like. Often many questions about identity, sexuality, and that got a whole lot bigger in the last 10 years, really, just in our culture, is what I mean by that. But they can also be emotionally confused a lot of the times. Sometimes they don't know why they feel the way they feel. Sometimes they don't know what they feel. Teens often put pressure on themselves, and they can struggle when they don't live up to their own expectations. So they actually, and there's more and more studies that this Gen Alpha and Gen Z put a ton of expectations on themselves. And I think part of that does come from the social media influence that they have. And so first and foremost, they don't feel like they live up to their own expectations. So then if they feel like they're not living up to your expectations, that's like a double burden. So just be mindful of that. Teens, mood swings, very common. The emotional outbursts can be very common, and a lot of this has to do with what's going on in the brain. Teens and toddlers actually have a lot in common. They do. It's true. They really do. And some of that, remember I said those are the two times when brain development is most significant. They are often very judgmental. Anybody experienced that before? They're entitled, but they believe that they deserve this. So it's not like they just are trying to hope that you believe it. They truly believe that. But one of the things that they can be really adamant about is that they can really grab onto a cause. They can really feel like, and I would say even more so with Generation Alpha, they are social advocates, and Gen Z for sure too. And so they can really kind of connect to a cause, and there's a lot of empathy that comes in. And yeah, I'm guessing this probably describes your teen pretty well. So they have also increased anxiety and stress as well. And some of that does come from the brain development that's happening. So they're seeing certain things that they didn't have before in their brain. So what can parents do? Recognize that much of what you're seeing has to do with hormones. They're not always going to be this way. And I can attest to that. Like, my kids are very different than they were at teens. I'm a different person than I was at a teen, right? So they're not always going to be this way, but a lot of it is hormones. Your child brain, as I mentioned, is seeing so many more hormones than ever before. So really what we should give them is sympathy. Not in every situation, but I think if we're not giving sympathy to them, we're actually not understanding how God has made them and how they're growing. The next thing is offer comfort during emotional lows, especially during emotional lows. really want to be able to walk with them, be with them, support them. This is what the Lord does to us. He doesn't be like, stop feeling this way. He's with us and he comforts us. The Psalms are such an amazing picture of God's voice of comfort to us in our lowest places. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I'll be really upset or distressed by something, and then 2 years later I'll be like, I'm so upset about that. Or maybe even 2 months later or 2 days later. But God isn't dismissive of that. He meets us and gives us these comforting words. So we want to do that as well. You also want to be clear. Oh, this is so important. This is so important. Be clear. I think we as parents think we're clear, but if we're honest, half the time we're figuring it out as we're telling them. We're like, well, I think you better do this and this and this, and it's like, and then it changes, and none of that is helpful for your team. I would rather you go slow and feel like you're missing a situation, like, oh, we got to get on this right now. I'd rather you go slow and actually be clear and communicate your expectations accurately to them and not have to change them than to throw them into a place where it's like, now I'm going to change it. And it's okay if we don't know it. Half the time we've never done this before ourselves, so it's okay. It's better to kind of slow it down. Be clear in those communications and expectations, because if you aren't, it will just add fuel to the fire. You're just going to make the situation more intense. Be consistent. If you say you take away the phone for a week or whatever, then the next day don't be like, whatever, just be consistent, but be gracious. So make sure that's the line you want to draw, that you can hold that line. Because that might sometimes be a line that you are like, oh shoot, I wish I would have drawn that line. In the moment it felt really passionate and important, but be consistent and gracious. Teens really need this. You want to be careful not to take things personal. Oh, this is probably one of the number one things that I say to parents of teens. I used to carry them in my bag. I used to carry little Q-tips with me, and because I did a lot more family counseling before I came from the plane, and I'd hand the parent a Q-tip and said, do you know what this is? Yeah, it's a Q-tip. Do you know what it means? Quit taking it personal. So that was the word Q-tip. Quit taking it personal. Half the time it's going to feel so, well, not half, probably 75% of the time it's going to feel so personal because they're coming at you and they're pressing into you. But if you take it personal, what are you going to do? Where's it going to put you? It's going to put you on the defense, right? So you're going to come right back at them. Don't let it be a personal attack. This is actually what I'd love for you to see these challenging moments with your teen as an opportunity. And I know this is easier said than done, but anytime you are in an interaction with your teen and it is intense and there's a lot of emotions and you're not sure what to do and you're feeling a lot of feelings yourself, you forget that you are also in the room. You tend to hyper-focus on our teens and what they need to do and what they need to change and what you need to do to kind of help them get to the place they need to be. But you forget that you're in the room. And if you're in the room, then God is working on you too. So this is an opportunity for you to be able to give them grace, with humility. Actually, I mean, there's been so many times with our kids where when we were growing up, where we were like, we don't know if this is the right thing to do, but we want to do what's best by you, and so we're taking this step, hoping this is right. But we need you to pray for us as well. There's so many times. So with my husband and I, by God's grace, whenever we would have heated situations, whenever we had heated situations, we committed to a couple of things that we were just, this is going to happen regardless of where the conversation went. They were going to walk away from that conversation knowing that we loved them, that we were for them, and that God loves them. And so however that conversation ended, it was going to end with that. And I tell this story because I've told this story before, but I remember when my youngest he was still living at home. He was probably like 19. And, he's living at home. So we still had rules or whatever. He didn't like the rule, but, we said, that's okay. That's still the rule. That's what we're going to do or whatever. He was so mad. He got out and he went out the front door because he was leaving. I don't remember where he was going, but he went down. Our driveway was down below. He went down, got his car, and he drove up and he stopped at the door because you had to kind of drive up the driveway to the side of our house. He gets out of his car and he comes back and he says, I just want you to know I love you and for you. But, say it in a heated moment, really, but just like, hey, this is hard, but this is what is true. So, kind of got off topic there, but we want to also model loving responses and interactions. Try not to take things personally. When you do bring corrections, like I mentioned, affirm your love for them. Encourage them, even when there's going to be consequences. Encourage them. Be sensitive to their struggle with insecurity and point them to where they can find security for their identity, for their hope, for their comfort, whatever it is that they are struggling with. Point them to the Lord. They need that. Even if they're not fully embracing it, just keep telling it to them. We raised our kids like this, and I actually had an interview this week with a potential candidate for a role, and I asked, there's a husband and wife, I asked them, I said, outside of going to church every Sunday, what makes your family a Christian family? Like day to day, what does it look like? Because I think if I were to open up the door of your house, I would be able to tell what kind of family it is. Is it a Christian family? And that needs to show, and it was great to kind of hear this mom and dad interact, or this husband and wife interact about what kind of things makes their home a Christian home. Friends, it needs to look different than the rest of Loudoun County. If opening up your door to your living room in the middle of any time of the day looks the same as somebody else, we're missing something. So make sure that Christ is the center of your home, not just the center of your Sunday. It's got to be living, breathing, interacting all the time. So I think. So I do want to ask this question. So I'm going to kind of ask a rhetorical question. What if my child did not get some of the things that I wish they had at an early start? Here's what I will tell you. Positive experiences and responsive relationships, as well as opportunities to learn and grow in supportive and safe environments, build and repair a child's brain. You can actually kind of rebuild and repair it. So the Lord is not bound. The Lord is not bound by our brains or our upbringing. He can use and redeem any situation. So I just want to encourage you in that. And so in light of that, I'm gonna buzz through just kind of quickly. 8:30, right? So we're good. Teens and mental health. This is where we kind of shift gears. I wanted to lay that foundation so that you understand, like, there are different stages where things are just not going to be something we need to worry about, and there's going to be some things that show up in various stages where we're like, okay, this is a concern. Teens and mental health is a concern. The stuff that Casey shared is absolutely accurate, and I'm going to share with you just a few things that have kind of got us to this point. In December of 2021, the U.S. Surgeon General issued a statement saying that there's an urgent need to address the mental health crisis in youth. So that was December 2021. Less than 1 month later, January 2022, the American Academy of Pediatrics declared a national state of emergency on children's mental health. February, 1 month later, so this is all, within December 2021 to February 2022, Pew Research released a result of a poll that they had asked parents. So keep in mind when this is. This is like COVID to kind of getting into post-COVID a little bit. So Pew Research released results that they asked parents. They said, what, in light of the pandemic, and this is sort of like we're coming out of it, knowing your kids have gone through this or some still in it, what are you most concerned about? And they had a whole list of various concerns. The top 2 things, and by a significant amount, 67% said we are concerned about what the long-term impact academically that this has had on our kids. 61% said the long-term impact on my kids' emotional health. So that was just a couple of years ago. We are seeing that both of those things are actually very accurate. Academics and mental health have not really recovered in the way that we had maybe hoped they would. So then in May of 2023, a year later, the Surgeon General basically again is saying we have some very significant concerns about our children's mental health, and he is now focusing on fortunate. Some of these I just shared the top one, but these are also across the world. This is not just in the United States. So the first one I shared, the second one is Canada. Survey of the youth in Canada revealed that 1 in 3 teens report feeling psychologically distressed. And of the teen surveys in the UK, 27% reported feeling nervous, anxious, and on edge almost nearly every day. 1 in 3 adolescents will meet the criteria for an anxiety disorder by the age of 18. Raise your hand if you have a teenager. Look around this room. 1 in 3. That's a lot of kids, right? 1 in 3 of the kids that are represented in this room. So when we look out there and we see the kids, like, that's our kids.
What's an example of that? What anxiety is?
So generalized anxiety, who asked that question? Oh, right here. Generalized anxiety is probably the biggest category. Anxiety disorders will include things like phobias, and even OCD can fall into that. So yeah, I would say probably the biggest one is what we would consider generalized anxiety. Panic disorder, very good term. 1 in 6 children between the ages of 6 and 17 have already been diagnosed with a mental illness. And the number of teenagers who experience depression increased by 59% in a 10-year period. That's actually a really important statistic. Because if we saw an increase of, well, let's just say 60% of anything in our children in a 10-year period, let's say if we saw an increase of childhood heart like disease or something like that in a 10-year period, or leukemia, an increase of 60% in the last 10 years, we would go, what is wrong? What are they exposed to, right? What's happening to our kids? That's a huge statistic for any medical statistic to jump that much. So what to look for? And I'm sure in some ways, hearing this, you guys are kind of thinking like, okay, so 1 in 3, what do I need to do? What do I need to and these are just some things. So there's various signs. I'm going to give you several different categories of signs. These are the physical signs. Just because your teenager has these signs does not mean they are in a mental health crisis. I'll talk about that in just a second. But these are some of the things you want to look for. And with younger children, these are the symptoms that show up as physical signs more than some of the other ones that we're going to look at in a second. So unexplainable headaches. These are things not connected to a medical diagnosis. Sleep changes, excessive sleep, insomnia, or nightmares, things like that. Be aware of these things. Self-injury, such as cutting, burning, or hitting themselves. Self-injury is not the same as suicidal ideation. They are completely 2 different classifications, but they are concerning. So just because your child is cutting does not mean they're suicidal. Attempts to end their life, that's why it's in a completely different category there. Change in appetite, increased heart rate, like if your kid is saying things like that, like I just feel my heart a lot. Pay attention to that. They're actually feeling probably something that's going on in them. These last 2 are, again, tight chest, difficult breathing. For younger children, regression, things like diabetic, things like that. Emotional signs, so you're looking for, keep in mind, mood swings are normal. That's why I went through all that. Some of this is normal. Drink if I gotta get over that. Talk louder than the it might just break.
Yeah, the airport's right there.
Are they landing?
Maybe.
Like it's already airstrip?
The airport's right there, yeah.
That's awesome. All right, so those couple at the top, lots of interest in things that they normally enjoy is something we really want to watch for. Overreaction to minor disappointments or stressors. Now, what I want you to know is like, if this is all you've got a teenager. But if you're seeing a lot of these things, so I don't want you to freak out and be like, oh, my kid's always overreacting. They don't have a mental health problem. Difficulty, so you're looking for those things together. Difficulty regulating or managing their emotions, decline in school performance or ability to focus. With younger children, you're looking for like that regression, clinginess, or temper tantrums. I put it all in there because I knew that the other kids' ages represented here. So those are emotional signs. So if you have some of the physical signs and some of the emotional signs, then you need to be maybe, okay, maybe there is something going on. And then lastly is the relational signs. Difficulty slowly adjusting to change in the family, changes in your family are going to be hard for kids. And so if you are a family who's had to have multiple changes, all the more you want to be very in tune to their emotional health. You want to do some of those things that I talked about, like how to talk with them about their emotions and engage them in their emotions if you've had a lot of changes. If you notice unusual withdrawal from close friends or family, problems at school, classmates, social isolation, risky behaviors, all of a sudden they're doing things that you wouldn't think they would do otherwise, there might be something else going on. However, keep in mind, frontal lobe isn't developed yet, so they don't have the inhibition to know that if I do this and that, so they might be. So don't just take one thing and think my kid's got issues that I need to really be looking at. Are there multiple things on each of those categories? Sudden change in moral convictions can also be a sign of mental health struggles. Experimentation with drugs or alcohol, aggressions with friends or family members. Again, not just one or two of those, like you were looking for multiples. Spiritual signs, no longer interested in the things they once believed. Significant lack of self-worth, that's a big one for sure. Excessive guilt, or maybe lack of guilt, or a strong negative emotions around the subject of God. Not a kid is wrestling with their faith. That's good. If your child is wrestling with their faith, like let them wrestle with you. But if you're starting to see some real hesitations to some of these things, all of those things you want to look for as like kind of grouped together. So then the question is when to get help, because I don't want you to take those. A lot of times people are like, oh my goodness, now I'm fearful of my child having a mental health diagnosis that I just don't know about. So when do I need to actually be more concerned? I'm going to tell you about what a mental health crisis looks like. A child mental health crisis is any time your child is no longer safe to him or herself or to others, or when there's a need for immediate action or intervention. It's usually a time when all of your energies are being demanded in order to care for your child. And some of you, I don't know you guys in this room. Some of you may have been there, or maybe some of you are there now, where you're feeling like all of our energies are devoted to this kid. When you are in a space like that, like this is when you need other people around you. This is the time when we're talking about a crisis. This is the times where parents are concerned, are they going to find their child in a situation like their deepest need? If that is the case, you want to get help. And the help comes from, first and foremost, you talk to your pediatrician. Your pediatrician can be a help when you're starting to feel like we're seeing things that are very concerning here. And I'm gonna open this up to you guys because I want to know what your concerns are about all of those things. Attend to yourself though. In the midst of this, you want to make sure you are caring for yourself. And when the best thing that you can do is anchor yourself to the truth of God's word. Hold on to the fact that even if some of these things are actually impacting your child, or maybe tonight is just like, whoa, my eyes are a little bit more open to my child so I can understand them, but to the reality of what they're facing. I want to encourage you to go to. This is not just a tag on. This is what will get you through. This is what you will need to anchor yourself. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Don't lean on your own understanding. We need the body. We need the Lord. We need help. Fear not, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. This is for you as parents, raising kids in this kind of a world where these are the things that are coming at our teens. This verse in Isaiah is very much a verse that I certainly had in my prayers and in my thoughts throughout times of raising my kids. You keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you because he trusts in you. Trust in the Lord, for the Lord God is an everlasting rock. Okay, I'm going to stop there because that's actually getting into more content. So I want to open it up for questions. And I know I kind of gave you a general overview of understanding your kids' brain development and understanding what you can expect in different stages and ages, and then kind of threw at you some statistics of mental health. What I really wanted to do is actually find out, where are you guys? What are some of the questions that you're feeling I need helping them through just navigating. And here's the thing about it. Anytime you have whatever the issue is with your child that you're dealing with, but that's a big one for sure. We tend to want to just give quick solutions to it, but they're wrestling with what we wrestle with. Only it feels like their whole world is wrapped around that. But it's still an aspect. Like, I still care what you all think about me. And yet, that does reveal that my eyes have moved off of the place they need to be, right? So I care about what people think about me, and I can actually care about it too much. So in some ways, you want to be able to connect, like, I can relate to that. There's something in that that's relatable. But if the only answer that I give them is, me too, then it's kind of like, oh, great. Not a lot to look for in an adult life either. Right? So instead, I want to give them what do I do? And this is where you as parents need to know, what do you do when your worth is threatened? When your identity, you start looking for it in your abilities or your work or whatever. What do you do? How does the Lord bring you back around and correct you in that? We seek so often, I think it was Tim Keller said, we seek as people, we seek to achieve what we have received. We seek to try to be everything to, like pleasing and accepted and all of this, and we've received that from the Lord. So in that kind of a question, I actually want to encourage you guys to go back to, and this goes more into parenting. Why are we parenting our kids? Are we parenting for behaviors or for like certain outcomes? Or are we parenting to actually to grow their hearts towards the Lord? So in that kind of a situation, bring them back to the Lord, because that's where we need to go as well. And that's what I mean by, if we opened up the doors of our house, would we see that as part of our conversations? To where when my kids are wrestling, I'm not just being, like, you can comfort them with like, yeah, everybody feels that way, or that's not true, or whatever. But what is true? What is true? And the way that they begin to believe it, the way that it gets stuck in here, I tell this to my counselors. People will ask me all the time in my counseling training, how do I get, Rebecca's going to know this because she was in my class, how do I get from here, what's up here, to here? Like, I believe it God here, but I don't really feel it here. Well, let me kind of reverse engineer that. How do they get, I'm not worthy, I'm not worth anything, people don't like me, I'm not accepted, I'm not loved, to here? Because they feel that in their heart. How do they get from here to there? They practice it over and over and over and over and over again. So as parents, we want to help them practice the truth. So you're going to give them the truth over and over and over and over and over and over again. Because that's how it gets from here to here. We repeat it. Paul says that these things you have seen and heard in me, practice them. It's not just you hear it once, you practice it. So yeah.
Yeah, two questions. First thing, you spoke about children having from 19 to 25, right? Something.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if anybody can relate to it, but my daughter, see, high school 18, right? They're off to college. So let's say I
I have a list of, part of it is actually how you ask the questions. It really truly is. I don't know, it can always come up though. So don't worry so much it's going to come up. But I have a list, I'll put them up there and you guys can just grab one. But they have different ways to engage your children like emotionally, like try to explore where they are emotionally in different ages. And a lot of it is going to be like just presence. Sometimes like, can I sit with you? And even that, like for them to invite you in that moment when they're like feeling pretty intense, like that's big. You don't always have to say a whole lot. But if you get a lot of I don't knows, you can explore it with like imagine type things. What if you did know? What could it be? You know, and you just don't always settle for I don't know. Sometimes you gotta let it be there, but the other part of it is they might not know. So then you gotta begin to learn to explore a little bit more with them, not just give them that. If that's the question that they're not sure about, kind of move around it from different angles, and that might help you if you want to grab a sheet right there. I thought, did you have a question? I thought you did, and then.
And I don't know if that paper there will help, but when you keep talking about talking to the kids, if you have a child who just doesn't talk to you very well, is very closed off, how do you engage in what I see recommendations?
Yeah. So there are some suggestions there, but a couple things I would say is this kind of talk can be really intimidating for some people. Like just sit down and let's talk. Like that can be really, like just way too overwhelming for them. So find other ways to talk and start by little things. You know they can talk about some things. Whatever it is they're into. Go for a walk with them. They won't want to go for a walk. I can't tell you how many I don't want to go for a walks we went on with my kids. So many. But there is something that we have learned about the brain. This is where, yeah. So something called bilateral stimulation, where we stimulate both sides of the brain, and that actually begins to help you move into what's called the orienting response, which is basically where we process. So in order to get into the orienting response, what can sometimes help is bilateral stimulation of the brain, connecting to both sides of the brain. One of the ways we can do that in therapy is through what's called tapping, things like that. But you know what you do when you walk? You're stimulating both sides of the brain with every step. So taking a walk actually does help the processing, but don't press it. If you get like 2 sentences out of them through, walk around the block, great, you had a win. So try other ways of talking to them rather than sitting down and whatnot. Certainly driving can be a good one. If you go for a drive or when you're driving home to and from or whatever, have some questions that you can maybe ask them. But if there's certain questions that every day is the same, try something else. Go with something they like. If you can find one thing they like, even though that's not what you want to talk about, get them going and it will help just to create an environment where we talk. Over here and then over there.
First question, I hope is simple, none of the serious one. I couldn't type as fast as we went through the slides. Is there a possibility of getting some of what you put up there, like emailed out to us or something?
Sure.
Okay, that's the easy one.
I'll send it to Casey.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Or Jen.
Great, thank you. The other question is, for my boys, like we kind of became like the hub during COVID where all the neighborhood kids came into our basement,
Awesome.
which was fun and chaotic, and there's house damage to the wall. But that being, because it was almost all boys, so at one point I'd have like 16 boys in my basement and it was chaos. But I'm having this weird interaction now where there's a good deal that still come over, and they're walking in with their issues, okay? And not to say our kids don't have their own, they do, but our kids are becoming, oddly enough, a frontline encounter with another kid that's got some issues. And they're coming to mom and dad going, okay, what's going on? And so now I'm having to figure out how do I explain to them, for someone who's got a little more than a brain stem, or maybe not too much yet, but they're recognizing there's something wrong here. They want to help them. They are wildly not equipped to do so. But they're also friends with this kid, they care about them. And so I'm kind of looking, is there a version of, what do you do with your kids when they're encountering someone else with an active mental health issue of some kind, or what it appears to be from where you sit there? Like, what do you tell them? Like,
Yeah. I would say, first of all, tell them thank you for coming to me and telling me that. Like, that's such a huge thing. And as much as you do not like what your kids are telling you, because sometimes they'll tell you things like, oh, I was with so-and-so, and then they start smoking weed and blah 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 or whatever, you're like, thank you for telling me.
Yeah.
We tend to be like, don't hang around them, don't talk to whatever, but like, thank you for telling me, even though inside you're like. First of all,
We had a few of those.
I'm so glad you told me. Like, I really want to talk this out with you and try to help you. And you don't have to, parents, you do not have to be pros. Kids are actually okay when you don't know the answer. But don't leave it there. I don't know, but I'm going to find out. I'm going to talk to somebody else. We're going to get some support in this. And just encourage them to keep telling you what else is going on, what else, and if you don't know the answer, you're going to know some of the answers that you can give to them. But if you don't know, it's okay to say, I'm gonna try to find a resource. Maybe we can even look at something together, where we can kind of talk through a certain topic and read about it and whatnot. But first and foremost, I just want to say, way to go! Like, you created an environment. That's great. Praise God for that. So, yeah. Last question over here, because then it's like time to go. I can make hurry.
So thank you for the developmental process. Doing a good job. Wanted to understand a little bit beyond social media and the impact of device time on kids as they're developing and it being a connection to mental health as they get older. Have you seen any of your studies linkages and what that magic time is, if it's nothing at all, and for each age group?
Yeah, there are. I didn't get those down. There are different. Those actually keep changing, and I actually think there's a little bit of. Well, here's what I would say.
And I'll include like TV, Netflix, or Cocomelon, YouTube,
Yeah.
like into that category, like Netflix to device time, anything that's stimulating the brain.
Yeah. So I have a brand new grandbaby, and their pediatrician told them nothing for the first year. You need no screens at all. Fisher Price way back in probably like 2000. I can't remember. It was when the iPad really first came out, so a while ago. Fisher Price, the little toy maker, came out with a extra saucer thing that had an iPad mount on it. And it quickly got ripped off. I snapped a picture of it. I don't know if I can find it or not, but it quickly got ripped off of their product line because people were like, what? Put a screen in front of a baby, can't even sit upright themselves or whatever. So there was some pushback on that. But I do think the reason why I see it changing is because there's so much money in social media and in digital devices and in entertainment digitally that it skews the research. So you will have people write books that will say the research shows this, and then you'll have other books. I'm just now seeing this more and more. There'll be other books that will say, oh no, it's actually not harmful. But the majority of the true actual research, what you're seeing in some of those other resources is like more like empirical evidence rather than actual research. But and that is actual research, but it's different than like qualitative data. The bottom line is most people will say, most doctors, pediatricians, will say it's just not helpful. I don't have the classifications as to how much each stage and age goes. I would say the least amount the better. But one of the things that I am noticing about Gen Z is that, and millennials, because I have them, those are mine. They actually, and actually I've seen this with some of the parents recently, they actually don't mind when the phone is taken away from them. I mean, they throw a fit or whatnot, but there's like almost this weird, like something that happens to them when their phone gets taken away, where it's like the pressure has been lifted, and they have so much pressure, not only from the things that are directly coming at them from their friends, like direct texts or messages, but just watching what's happening on their feed. There is a certain obligation that they begin to feel to do something, which is why they're activists. They are social activists, and so they have to like jump on this cause, and then they jump on this cause, and then they change their profile picture to do this because whatever. And there's a lot of pressure, and they feel it. And so most of the time, because I got in trouble, when you take that phone away, the first day they're really angry and can't believe it or whatnot, but then they kind of are like, am I cool with it? So much so that there are some millennials and Gen Zers who are reverting away from smartphones, so on their own choice. So they know that it's actually not good for them. We know it's not good for us, and yet we're probably all going to be scrolling sometime in the next 24 hours. So yeah, I don't have specifics on that. It's a good thing to, but there's a lot of Yeah. Not a Christian, but he's definitely saying like this is not helpful. He probably has a lot more statistics. Have you read the book? Yeah. Sure. So, guys, thank you so much. I know there's so much more we could talk about. There is so much more. I have tons more. So maybe I'll come back. But thank you so much. It was great to be with you guys. So appreciate you. Take a book, one for family, and yeah, I think that's it. Thanks.
Find ourselves
Understand that let's do the best they can, bring as foreigners into the country. And I knew that like I needed to get them embracing that. Right?
Thank you.